In acquiring Victor Soderstrom from the Chicago Blackhawks and signing him to a one-year contract, the Bruins might have pulled off what could become the most underrated move of the offseason.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Monday, June 16th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we are going to discuss the trade for and signing of defenseman Victor Soderstrom over the weekend. Going to break down why this was such a smart play by GM Don Sweeney and the Bruins front office scouting staff. We'll break down Soderstrom's trajectory after being drafted 11th overall in 2019 and why he is being targeted by this team. And we'll also discuss David Pastrnak, Pavel Zacha being named to the initial roster for Czechia for the Olympics, and also whether or not Pavel Zacha will be a Bruin next season based on a recent mock draft in The Athletic, which floated a trade involving the Vancouver Canucks. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the hockey world at large for about 20 years now. So on Friday night, my wife and I dropped our youngest son at a trampoline park for a birthday party. Decided to head over to Chick-fil-A for dinner, and while there, the news dropped that the Boston Bruins had acquired Victor Soderstrom from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for defensive prospect Ryan Mast and a 7th-round pick at the upcoming 2025 draft. When you dig into the details, this was a classic buy low move with the potential to pay off in a big way. I wasn't super familiar with Soderstrom's story and even his profile prior to this trade. I had heard that he had been acquired by the Blackhawks just before this year's trade deadline from the Arizona Coyotes. But the more I dug into it, the more I saw some real value potential here. And it's the kind of deal that you just love to see. So many times we've talked about the Bruins' failures at the draft and an inability to get some first round picks. They traded a bunch away. A couple years ago, they traded Eric Haula for Pavel Zacha, who was like 6th overall in 2015. Now they have traded essentially what was a 6th round pick in 2021 and a 7th round pick this year for a guy that was drafted 11th overall back in 2019. Now, yes, there are reasons why he has not hit as others have from that draft, and we'll discuss that in a little bit here. But giving up minimal assets, a depth defensive prospect, unlikely to, let's be honest, ever play for the Boston Bruins, plus a late round pick, which is a total crapshoot, also unlikely to hit. They acquire the 11th overall pick from the 2019 draft, who's a mobile right shot defenseman with clear NHL tools. The upside here just far outweighs the cost. Even if Söderström doesn't work out, it's a huge shrug because you're giving up Ryan Mast, again, no disrespect, but unlikely to crack the NHL. Probably a career minor leaguer or over in Europe, who knows. And a 7th round pick that, the track record of 7th round picks becoming value assets at the NHL level is not great. So the upside here far outweighs the cost. And the Bruins have some decisions to make on the right side, and they're pretty light on the right side. They did acquire Henri Jokiharju from the Buffalo Sabres after trading Brandon Carlo to kind of offset that. But even with Charlie McAvoy healthy, it's pretty thin with him, Andrew Peeke, Ian Mitchell. If Henri Jokiharju is not going to re-sign, then you have a guy like Söderström who can come in at just $775,000 on a two-way deal with arguably more long-term upside. And in a tight cap environment, Boston seems to be choosing the younger, cheaper, higher upside route, which is a smart and disciplined call. Söderström was unlikely to get an NHL shot in Chicago. The Athletic reported that Sam Rinzel and Artem Levshunov are rising fast in that organization, and the Hawks weren't going to block their development for Söderström. Didn't appear as though Söderström had a big appetite to sign there either. And I believe that he had until yesterday to opt out of his Swedish Hockey League contract and sign an NHL deal, which is why the trade happened on Friday and then contract shortly thereafter. That's not the case in Boston, right? As I just mentioned, after trading Carlo to Toronto, the Bruins are suddenly thin on the right side, and only Charlie McAvoy and Andrew Peeke are really regulars under contract for this upcoming season on that side. Now, they still might reach out to Jokiharju's camp in terms of re-upping with the Bruins. He did have some nice chemistry with Nikita Zadorov on the blue line. Maybe they look at a guy like Dante Fabro or explore the market. But with Boston, Söderström has a clear opportunity, and he could be the perfect candidate to step in and make an immediate impact. After bouncing between the AHL and the NHL within the Coyotes organization, that's the team that drafted him 11th overall, Söderström returned to Sweden last season and looked pretty good, posting 36 points in 47 games with Brynäs, fourth on the team in scoring as a defenseman, and he was named the top defenseman in that league this past season. The skill is there. He's got mobility, puck-moving sense, a shot that remains pretty high level. By Boston signing him to a 1-year, 2-way contract, there's no long-term risk. There's no roster pressure. And even if he doesn't crack the NHL lineup, he can still go to Providence and hone his game there or become a recall candidate. He will have an opportunity to compete for a roster spot at camp or start the year in Providence and be ready when injuries inevitably hit. And if he hits, you've just added a guy with top 4 upside for under $1 million for this upcoming season. He's a once premium prospect who's finally in a system with a clear opportunity and a need for what he brings. The Bruins with this trade got younger, cheaper, potentially even better on the right side of the blue line, all while giving up pretty much nothing. And that's not the kind of move that makes headlines today, perhaps, but could look pretty smart come December. Now, why was he available? Where has he been? Well, we're going to walk through his development arc from SHL talent to Arizona's big draft swing to his recent resurgence in Sweden. And now this next chapter with the Bruins here as the podcast continues. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When we started using Monarch, we realized just how much we were spending on coffees. Now we budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Managing money is so much easier with Monarch. Sign up now and budget smarter to save more. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please do subscribe if you have not already. All right, let's go back and just look at Victor Soderstrom's development and career progression to see how he ended up as a member of the Boston Bruins. Back in February of 2019, Söderström spent most of his season playing with Brynäs of the SHL, which was an impressive feat for a draft-eligible defenseman. Played big minutes, quarterbacked the power play, was praised for his high hockey IQ, mobility, and puck-moving ability. And that June, the Coyotes traded up to select him 11th overall. They sent the 14th overall pick and the 45th overall pick to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for the 11th pick, which they used to draft Söderström. You might be wondering what those picks ended up being. Well, Philadelphia used the 14th overall pick to select Cam York, who has now played 235 NHL games, 77 points to his credit. And then the 45th pick looks like that was flipped as well, and it was used to select Igor Afanasyev by the Nashville Predators. This move reflected then GM John Chayka's strong belief in Soderstrom's upside as a top-pairing right-shot defenseman. And we all remember Chayka as a analytics guy looking to build a smart hockey team with value players, and that's why they traded up in order to secure his rights. After a solid camp in Arizona, he was loaned back to Brynäs for further development. He was eligible to play in the AHL, but both his camp and the Coyotes agreed that staying in Sweden was best for his long-term growth. We all know what happened that year, COVID. Prior to that, he was named to Team Sweden for the World Junior Championship, 6 points in 7 games as one of Sweden's top defensemen at that tournament. In March of 2020, he was returned to Brynäs and played big minutes, finished the SHL season with 16 points in 35 games, one of the team's best blue liners despite his young age. Then, due to uncertainty around the North American season because of COVID-19, he was loaned to AIK to get regular playing time, again, still over in Europe. 2021, another strong World Junior showing with 5 assists in 5 games. He came to North America and was placed on the Coyotes taxi squad, which those were set up, for the bubble COVID season in terms of reinforcements. He made his NHL debut, played a couple games before being assigned to Tucson in spring of 2021, finished the season with 10 points in 32 AHL games, including 4 in his final 4 games. He was recalled by Arizona and scored his first NHL goal in one of the final games for them that season. So things seem to be progressing well, although COVID kind of threw a wrench in things. He did make Arizona's opening night roster in 2021 after a strong camp, but was scratched early, went scoreless, and spent most of the year shuttling between the AHL and the NHL. In 2021-22, he played 16 NHL games, 0 points, 32 AHL games with 19 points. He was still viewed then as a top prospect, but began falling a bit behind in the Coyotes' plans. He was sent to AHL Tucson to start 2022-23. They had brought in other depth defensemen, and Söderström had not shown enough to solidify his NHL role. Decent AHL season, 21 points in 44 games. He was recalled in February by the Arizona Coyotes, 6 points in 18 games during that stint, 5 of which came in a 10-game stretch. Despite these flashes, though, Coyotes, who are now under new management, leaned toward larger, more physical defensemen, drafting Dmitry Simashev, Maverick Lamoureux, pushing Söderström further down the depth chart. In October 2023, he was waived, returned to Tucson, and his development seemingly stalled in the Coyotes organization. When they moved to Utah, he was extended a qualifying offer. This was in July of 2024, keeping his rights as an RFA. But with little NHL opportunity on his horizon, he did return to Sweden for this past year, signing with Brynäs, now in the second league after being relegated from the SHL. He excelled in Sweden, 9 goals, 36 points in 47 games, 4th in team scoring, and this strong showing reignited NHL interest. And I should say Brynäs had been re-promoted after being relegated a couple of years ago. So, multiple teams showing interest, and in fact, Utah traded Soderstrom's rights to the Chicago Blackhawks in a deal that helped move Shea Weber's LTIR contract off the books. As I mentioned, the Blackhawks also have some up-and-coming defensemen, and it didn't look as though he was going to sign with Chicago. So after 3 months with that organization, the Bruins acquired his rights from the Blackhawks on Friday, sending defenseman Ryan Mast and a 7th-round pick in exchange for his rights. And then on Saturday, the Bruins signed Söderström to a 1-year, 2-way contract with a $775,000 NHL cap hit, giving him another chance to crack an NHL roster. His strengths: he's smooth skating, right shot defenseman with excellent hockey IQ, strong puck moving ability, and power play upside. He was once seen as a surefire top pairing prospect, but his slow NHL development and depth chart challenges led to a detour back to Sweden, where he reestablished his value. All told, he appeared in 53 NHL games for Arizona, 1 goal, 10 assists for 11 points, which isn't bad for your first 53 games, especially when you're going up and down between the AHL and the NHL. At the AHL level, he was more productive offensively and had the best season of his pro career in Sweden with 9 goals, 28 assists for 37 points in 49 games, winning the SHL Defenseman of the Year award. He's only 24 years old, and he enters this season with the Bruins as a potential low-risk, high-upside pickup. And if he translates his SHL resurgence to North American success, he could still develop into a very good third-pair defenseman, even perhaps a second-pair NHL blue liner behind Charlie McAvoy. So altogether, acquiring Victor Soderstrom was a smart, low-risk, high-upside value move for the Boston Bruins, and the kind of deal that could help the retool sooner than later. And I'm very happy with this move. I think it's a nice, tidy piece of work. And we'll see if he is able to crack the Boston Bruins roster and what else they do to shore up the right side, because they still need some depth there at the very least. McAvoy, Peak, Söderström might be a bit risky entering training camp. Still some things to do there, but to get Söderström at $775,000 is a very nice, tidy piece of work. All right, coming up to wrap up the podcast, we're going to discuss David Pastrnak, Pavel Zacha being named to the roster for Czechia for the Olympics, and also whether Zacha will still be a member of the Bruins by that time, because there are some rumblings out there that he could be a draft day move. All right, let's wrap things up today with some perhaps Olympic talk and some possible trade talk. It was announced today that David Pastrnak, Pavel Zacha were two of the 6 players named to Team Czechia for the 2026 Olympics, which will be played in Italy during the upcoming season. And Martin Necas was also on there, leading me to maybe some future line mates playing there together. There have been, everydayers will remember, a discussion about whether Necas could be available and whether he'd be a fit for the Bruins. The other guys were Radko Gudas, Lucas Dostal, and Andre Palat. And Team Canada, Team USA will name their original 6 coming up later today. Sweden did name theirs. Elias Lindholm was not on it, but Frank Saravelli saying Charlie McAvoy likely to be one of the first 6 selected by the Team USA. Now, that's fun, great, but the question is, will Pavel Zacha be a member of the Boston Bruins come Olympic time? And there was a recent mock draft done by The Athletic that suggested the Bruins could move Pavel Zacha at or prior to the draft. Look, the Bruins have positioned themselves to restock their prospect pool or use that draft capital to get creative. Along with their own number 7 pick, as a reminder, they hold 2 second-rounders this year via Edmonton and Colorado, Toronto's 4th in 2025, and their conditional 1st in 2026, a 6th for Minnesota next year, and that 1st from Florida in the Brad Marchand trade. And maybe tomorrow we'll discuss the implications of Brad Marchand winning the cup and maybe being a Conn Smythe favorite. The question, though, is will Don Sweeney double down on the rebuild by trading more NHL players to gain even more picks? And a recent mock draft in The Athletic suggested the Bruins keeping the 7th overall pick and selecting Jake O'Brien, but also acquiring the number 15 pick from Vancouver. So the Bruins would get the 15th pick, which they would use on a defenseman named Jackson Smith, plus forward Niels Höglander in exchange for Zacha and Marat Husnudinov, who is currently an RFA. If the Bruins are serious about a longer-term retool, moving Zacha now while his value is high could net them another first-round talent, possibly open up some flexibility. Höglander is coming off a down year, only 8 goals and 25 points, but he did score 24 the year before, locked in for $3 million, 3 more years, and he's 24, could thrive under Marco Stern. That number 15 pick gives Sweeney options, either take another future piece like Smith or use it in a package to trade for maybe a Necas or a Jason Robertson, who we've talked about earlier. But this isn't necessarily a move to take lightly. Zacha's still only 28, plays both center and wing. Very reasonable cap hit for another 2 seasons, $4.75 million. He's topped 50 points in 2 of his 3 seasons with Boston and would be a big loss from a top 6 that is already thin. Now, he had been bumped down to the second line after then interim head coach Joe Sacco put Lindholm up on a line with Morgan Geekie and David Pastrnak. So there's some question as to where he might fit. But in acquiring Höglander, you're getting a guy who's only making $3 million for the next few seasons, has scored 24 goals, but a career high 36 points, and a bit of a question mark to be sure there, whether or not he could indeed find another level. He was selected 2nd round, 40th overall back in 2019. The Bruins are mapping out like a 2 to 3 year rebuild. There's logic in moving Zacha now while he's affordable, productive, and in demand, especially if it brings back another first-round pick or leads to a bigger fish via trade. Höglander would be an interesting get. He does have some upside and could be a guy that could break out even further in the right system. He's only 24. He's a bit undersized at 5'9", but a very nice $3 million cap hit through 2020. When does his contract end? 2027, 28. So 3 years on that deal left. Only 8 goals, 25 points, but he played much of the season in Vancouver's bottom 6. It was a very challenging year for Vancouver as a whole, and his ice time dipped, as did his confidence as the season went on. But 2 years ago, 24 goals, 36 points, energy role, but showed a knack for finishing around the net and was a reliable 5-on-5 scorer despite limited power play usage. He's still young, highly skilled, can be a 20-goal scorer at the NHL level. Change of scenery and a defined role could help him regain his form. And Marco Sturm has a strong track record with younger players, and Hoglander's aggressive forecheck motor could mesh well with his season. There's some cost certainty there beyond what you get with Pavel Zacha, and that's valuable as the Bruins are transitioning into a younger, faster lineup and need cap flexibility to build around David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy. He's probably a middle 6 winger, but with a scoring touch and feistiness that makes him hard to play against. He could fit in as a third-line winger with offensive pop, or maybe even get a look in the top 6 if he rediscovers that form. So this isn't just a throw-in. He would be a genuinely useful everyday player for the Bruins, and it's a manageable number for a few seasons at the very least. The kind of reclamation project that's worth betting on during a retool. Skill, speed, and edge, kind of what you want from Husnudinov, but with a more proven track record. And then the Bruins would get the first-round pick as well. Hoglander won't replace Zacha in terms of versatility or production, but he could be a younger, cheaper piece with room to grow and allow the Bruins some cap flexibility to use more money elsewhere. What's your take on that? Let me know in the comments or on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. Are you in favor of this particular trade scenario? Again, it's not a report or a rumor, just part of that mock trade in The Athletic. And we'll keep on top of these mock trades, mock drafts, I should say. And, Bruins, Jake O'Brien have been tied. Brady Martin will get a better sense of where they might be leaning here as the draft approaches. So that's today's episode, breaking down Victor Soderstrom's acquisition and where he could fit in with the Bruins. That upside there, very smart move. These are the kinds of moves that Don Sweeney needs to continue to make. The Zacha to the Canucks move may equal the same, but maybe it's not worth giving up Zacha quite yet because he's kind of a known versus the unknown in Hoglander and what he could bring to the Bruins. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen. Again, please do check out Locked On NHL Game Night and the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no offseason here on Locked On. We're bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Same with Locked On Boston Bruins. I appreciate the regular listeners so much. Please do subscribe if you have not already and tell a Bruins loving friend in your life today about the podcast. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.